only knows
They do it on
pieces of
purpose.
words.
Yeah.
If AI is so smart, how come it can't count to 5 and stop when it's making fingers?
Yeah, they can't put them on the
come
right
on.
way.
Spelling is not important. If you understood what it said, why does it matter if it was spelled properly?
And I remember the early complaints of early days of Zoom when, oh, they don't have security. And it's like, well, they got fixed.
It's unrelated.
So we consequently, I think that has been fixed. And when you've got 10 million humans throwing energy and effort at it, it's going to get fixed faster than something else.
Here it comes.
I think
may you live in interesting times.
What throws them off is people say, well, humans have 5 fingers. No, they don't. They have 4 fingers and a thumb.
David Holtz talked about on his office hours on Wednesday. He talked about the fingers. 6 months ago, they couldn't do faces or bodies, so they got that fixed. They're working on fingers now.
Yeah,
not all of them.
This is John Preto doing air quotes in AI.
When I started my streaming company in 1996, it was 120 by 96 and 2 frames per second.
Do you think we could do a second hour point counterpoint on the AI? We can put the pro AI John Preto on one side and the neo-Luddite.
And who's going to be
Fenwick.
McLaughlin to say wrong?
It's being.
I'll sit in the middle because I'm still, that's my curse. Is I always say, what are the good things about this and what are the bad things about this? And there's always tons of each. You can see lots of ways it'll go wrong, and you can see lots of ways it will free people from drudgery and be more productive.
Famous story about King Canute, who said he could turn the waves back, and so he put his chair on the beach, and the water lapped around his feet. Anyone who thinks AI is stoppable is having a Canute moment.
Yes. And what fascinates me about David's comment, what's his last name, John? David, the guy that's the head of Midjourney?
Dave Holtz.
He's not as interested, at least in the public office hours comment that he's making. He's interested in community. And that's the part that this is a tool by which to change the world. And it will get monetized, absolutely. But
while Chad tells us that we have 1 minute left, I'm going to ask a question to everybody. Show of hands. Who here loves technology? Raise your hand. Okay. Everybody.
Hey, Bill, can you kick it off? I had a little bit of a fire I got to finish putting out on my end. So if you can just kick it off, and then I'll slide in a little bit later. Thanks.
Will do.
Thanks.
That would be the 30 seconds. That would be the core of my argument against Preto. You love technology.
Preto
and AI.
Forget about it. You talking to me?
Can't we all just get along?
What's the name of the thing Alex is hosting?
It's on the slate.
Silicon Valley.
Good morning and welcome to Office Hours. Great to have you all here. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do on officehours.global. Our first hour is a general discussion of production and IT related topics where we answer audience submitted questions. Our second hour is always a deeper dive into something, and we're really excited today because Alex has been away. He was gone yesterday, if some of you noticed that. He was at the Silicon Valley conference on technology, and he is going to come back in our second hour and report on that and tell us all of all the new stuff he saw there. So that all said, it's time to dive into our questions this morning. Mitch, what's our first question?
Thank you, Bill. Our first is in from Liberty White in Toronto, Canada. What does the panel think about the new features Ecamm announced yesterday? Any favorites?
And Nigel's going to start us off here. Nigel?
Thank you. My favorite is the video ISOs. I've only really started playing with it. I would tell you Ecamm has some of the best betas or betas that are really solid. They really work very well. So I've been playing with that. And the whole idea that a sort of lower entry point, you can use Zoom ISO into Ecamm and get video ISOs. We've only ever had audio ISOs, and mix a program that way. Ecamm gets better and better and stronger and stronger. And I know there are other sort of more high-end versions, but that one works as a great entry point.
I know you've only had it for a very short period of time, but was there something that really popped up to you that you thought you were going to find that particular feature useful, or is it just
it's really the video ISOs? That's the thing that every time the Torah Tech or somebody else I know is working with Ecamm, that's the thing I've been going on about. So I'm a one-man show when I do our work podcasts. So, I bring them in across the interviewer feature, which is really easy to use, but I think Zoom ISO will be a better quality picture. I mix the show using my Stream Deck, so I can, there's normally only 3 or 4 of us, and so I have all the scenes preset on my Stream Deck, and I really, by touch, can mix the show as we go. I record it using Ecamm, and up to now I've had each individual ISO of the audio stream, so I then bring all of that into Final Cut Pro and remix the audio to make it better, because invariably it's not level. The fact that I could now do that with video as well, if I can make that work, means actually I could do a multicam and have a completely different broadcast. And it's something that someone at my skill level can do, and it's really, really easy.
Thank you for that. That's a great explanation. Let's go on to the next question.
From Lucas Herzog in Mainz, Germany, Yamaha just introduced the AG08 live streaming mixer, which looks like a little bit like their version of a Flow 8. Any thoughts so far? And there's a link to it.
Mitch, you're going to take this on.
I'm going to kick it off. I don't think it looks as much like a Flow 8 as it looks more like a Rodecaster Pro. And all of those devices are starting to be podcaster experts. They all have the same features. They have multiple inputs with faders. They've got sound effects on little touch pads. They connect via USB. You can change your voice. And therein lies the problem I have with all these things is I really don't like all these sound effects. I think it should do just what it's meant to do, which is to provide a way to mix different microphones together. I'm not a big fan of all these weird things that you can do to your voice, because it only works once and then everybody's tired of it. So it's just a temporary kind of thing. So I'm kind of putting it towards a Rodecaster Pro 2, which Courtney has here. And some other people may have some opposing points of view, but I don't think it's a Flow 8.
So you think there's too much temptation there to use the toy tools and not make the professional ones?
Temptation and patience. Those are two things that have to be applied to those devices.
Fair enough. Chris Fenwick, your thoughts?
I don't know what that noise was. Interesting comment, Mitch. I think that it kind of goes back to like in the 80s when new keyboards were released. Some of them had very distinctive sound patches. And there was always like a race to say, oh, who's going to use the OB8, horn thing on their album? And then all of a sudden, Eddie Van Halen uses it on Jump. I think the coolest feature of this Yamaha mixer is you can get it in black or white to match the decor of your studio.
So we have to start thinking about mixer livery now, how it's what color you want to order it in. That'll be awesome. Alexander Knight has a thought. Oops, I'm not hearing you, Alexander. I think you're still muted.
Yeah, it looks pretty neat. The routing features look pretty good. The only thing I can't seem to find, which is rather important, is whether or not the preamps are any good. Now, Yamaha normally knows what they're doing with audio, but I'd be very curious to see the actual specs, the actual total gain that they give you on those preamps.
Are you worried about things like those inefficient microphones that we run across occasionally, like the Shure SM?
Yeah, that's my main concern. Yeah. There is a trend now with a lot of these types of products coming out that people are waking up to the fact that they need to start putting better preamps in these things for, the types of microphones that a lot of us use in broadcasts, like the RE20s, the PR40s, the SM7Bs, those types of microphones. I think it's hard to beat the Rodecaster Pro 2 at this point, especially considering that they keep on adding more and more functionality to it. I don't see anything in this Yamaha that offers any kind of noise suppression or downward expansion, anything like that. Maybe I missed it, but other than that, it looks like a pretty decent hardware for someone with, that just needs a couple of microphones.
Courtney, what are your thoughts?
I haven't had a chance to play with it. Just looking at it, I don't think it has near the features that the Rodecaster Pro does, especially since it doesn't have an LCD. You have to use an app or some type of web-based interface for it to control things like the limiters, any of the sound modification tools. It just has 2 VU meters on it. There's no LCD to operate it on the unit itself. Its main mix level is on the left. Main fader's on the left, which is absolutely the opposite of almost every other mixer on the market. It's flipped. So, I'm not sure I understand the layout, the decision not to make it operable without an external device to connect to it.
All right. Well, hopefully, Lucas, that gives you some food for thought. Let's go on to the next question.
And it's coming in from Jeffrey Reyes in Bronx, New York. Capture card or ATEM Mini? I was considering a Blackmagic 4K Quad HDMI capture card. I know it involves having to use software to switch, but does the panel think a hardware device like an ATEM is better?
Jesse Kester is going to start us off.
I think this is really going to come down to two major factors. The first is how important 4K is to you, and if 4K is essential to your workflow, then you've kind of ruled out the ATEM because that only the ATEM minis only exist in the world of 1920 by 1080. That said, if you do a lot of field production, if you find yourself as a mobile videographer, the ATEM ISO has absolutely changed how we approach, I'd say 75-80% of the clients that we service, how we approach those projects. And it has proved wildly useful beyond a video capture device across the board of all of our client services. So those would be the two main things that I think about as I go into this purchase. And if I were making it today, right now, I would get the ATEM Mini ISO.
Nigel?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, if 4K is really what you want, and that's the most important thing, is to capture 4K, I think you need a card that captures 4K, and I think that card you outlined is about $550. If, however, what you're starting to do is to think about production and making switching between sources, putting picture-in-picture, all that sort of thing, you're either going to end up with a software solution or you're going to with a hardware solution or some combination of the two. And again, if 4K is the only defining thing, Blackmagic 4K is a much more expensive entry point. If 1080 is good, you're going to end up buying an ATEM. I think this is a room full of people that ended up buying ATEMs and then bigger ATEMs and then bigger ATEMs. And so I think that's where you're going to end up. But it's going to absolutely depend on what you're trying to do.
Mitch Hill.
Yeah, I agree with Nigel. If you want 4K, you're not going to get it from an ATEM, so you're going to end up there anyhow. And if you want another alternative to compare it to, and you're comparing it to an ATEM, the thing we've been talking about, the Roland UVC02, might get you there if you just want to have a single device. There it is. Nigel's got one in his hand there. So he's one of the early adopters of the box. Looks like that might be one to consider. And if you just want to transfer your video from HDMI into USB, I have yet to open it yet, but it's my Condor Blue. But that only works at 1080 also. So it's not going to compare to a 4K image.
Courtney.
Yeah, I agree. And almost all streaming, live streaming is 1080p these days. Some people are doing 4K, but not that many because of the extreme cost and the bandwidth. I think the ATEM offers so much more than a regular capture card if you're going at 1080p. It offers you a complete audio setup, a complete mix panel with dynamics and all types of controls over multiple inputs. It offers you compositing with a pretty good green screen overlay, chroma key, and keying, lower thirds, a small medial library. All that stuff is built in from just even the entry level $300 one is quite capable. I would start there.
Alex Lindsay, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Sorry about that. We had a little bit of fire this morning around the world. Anyway, so I would say that generally everyone's right. The ATEM is probably the solution that you want. The only caveat would be if you want uncompressed footage. So if you want to have, for some reason, be able to capture something that's uncompressed, you're obviously not going to get that with the switcher. But otherwise, I think the switcher is probably the right way to go. Next question.
Michael Petra in Poland asking, what is the best way to start my adventure with augmented reality and camera tracking? I've heard about Mosys Academy. Have you heard about it? And what soft on Mac OS do you recommend to dive into this?
So you're kind of two things there. So the Mosys is a camera tracking system that allows you to basically have your camera, and you can add things to it. We kind of talk about AR. It gets to be kind of an odd space of what we call AR and what we don't call AR. But anyway, the Mosys, what it does is it allows you to track those cameras very accurately and then put CG elements into it, either in front or behind the person who's talking. I was actually just talking to someone from Mosys yesterday at the Silicon Valley video, and we're going to get them on the show to talk about that. So we'll be able to talk a little bit more about that. It was a very successful day yesterday. We'll talk about it in the second hour. But anyway, so we're going to talk to them about that. And specifically, as far as getting started in AI in AR, the question is, do you want to do it in the phone, or are you trying to do AR, the way that the computer graphics way that you're using with Mosys? Those are two different things. One is really kind of part of production, and another one is, what are you going to do with a phone, or what are you going to put on your face? And so think about exactly what you want to do, and then start to play with it. If the thing that I would think about is, if you're talking about a Mac and AR, the first thing you want to do is start looking at USDZ. So USDZ is the 3D format that Apple has picked up. USD was a Pixar format, and Apple just put a Z on it because they zipped it. So USDZ is a zipped version of the USD format, and it is what is used in. You can text that. You can open it in preview. You can open it in motion and through motion into Final Cut. So there's a lot of places that you can start to play with it. We expect to see a lot more this year. That's going to give you something where you can play with building something, throwing it on a desk, moving around it, and starting to get your head around what's possible. And I would look at that. I would also look at Metashape, which is going to let you build 3D models from from photographs. You can do a little bit of that with Polycam as well. And so those are, and Reality Capture, which is something you can get on your phone, and you can put that on and play around with photogrammetry, USDZ. Those are if you're asking where should I start on a Mac, that's where I would start. Next question.
Sky Gleason from Seattle, Washington, here on our panel. Has anyone painted with AI by using NVIDIA's Studio Canvas?
Go ahead, Sky.
I was just introduced to this tool, and the best description I can figure out is it's a visual version of GarageBand, in the concept of it's got the ability to have a paintbrush of a visual image like a cloud in their demo. And if their demo is anything like what is possible, it's mind-blowing, because what you can create visually in the shape and the size and the aspect ratio and the concept that you want, but it is inside the NVIDIA universe. So I was once working with a marketing firm, and they called it unique selling proposition. And so this is forcing you to go through NVIDIA. But again, I'd be interested in hearing what people's thoughts are on this new tool.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, it'd leave out half the people on this panel, because it only runs on Windows 10 and an NVIDIA RTX board. So you have to have the hardware to run it. It doesn't run on a Mac or it looks interesting. I'll have to put it on the one laptop that I now have that has an RTX board in it, and see how it works. But there's lots of limitations to that hardware.
It looks pretty exciting. So it is I think that this is really outlining, and we've seen some demos from NVIDIA for this for a while. It is outlining like how we're going to do previs, how concept drawings, building those things out without very, very fast. And I think that that's where you're going to see a lot of use around it. I mean, you might see other uses, but I think that that's going to be this kind of ability. And I think you're going to see this kind of infilling, exfilling technology in a lot of other things as they go down the path. But NVIDIA obviously is really aiming to take a leadership role in the metaverse. and figure out how they're going to make sure that they're serving that market effectively. Go ahead, Chris.
I know this is slightly off topic, and I believe it is NVIDIA. Has anybody seen that demonstration of the NVIDIA eye thing where it re-aims people's eyes at the camera?
Yeah. It looks really, really good, but every once in a while it clicks, so it doesn't, you get a little off axis, and it does something that you don't expect it to do. And the problem with that is it has to be perfect, pixel perfect, 100% of the time to make that work. If it misses one frame, it means that the other person on the other side is going to just stare at your eyes like, oh, that's weird, and then they want, it creates this level. So I think that it could work, but I think that it's a really dangerous thing.
If it's not spot on, that's where we connect with people.
Super weird.
It's kind of like that thing that's flopping over your shoulder. It's completely distracting, Alex. What is that?
My thing that's flopping over my
over
shoulder?
your right
your
shoulder.
lights.
Oh, the cat is playing with my lights.
I can't. I don't know if I can let you stay in the meeting. It's way distracting. Could you please leave and go fix that?
It's the cat. It's the cat. Is my flash.
Let
Usually
the cat
lights
out.
are on. Yeah, go ahead, Sky.
I want a cat. No,
Yeah.
I don't. I do. But Alex, you made the comment that this is early previs concept, and I just realize how many pieces of technology that are now front and center of style, and consequently, it may be previs until it becomes a commodity that people can get paid to do, and so that's where we just live in interesting times, and this is one of the new tools.
Yeah, and it's I think that there's a lot around concepts. I found that for Twit, we found that doing it's a really easy thing to do in Midjourney is to just build the thumbnails you want to use for Twit or other shows, because you can just create these kind of absurd things that you can throw in the thumbnail that turned out to be really a great use of Midjourney as a real production tool. But I think that there's a lot of conceptual stuff that I think we'll keep on playing with related to that, and so I think that it's it's going to be interesting. I don't look at it as right now. Currently, I don't look at it as a final thing. Although my last little off the subject, I got a request from NHK. NHK is a big broadcaster in Japan. Over Twitter, I don't know if you saw the back and forth with me on Twitter. They said we're using. I had posted a picture of the soup that I made. I asked ChatGPT to give me a soup, and I made it. Like I just took the recipe and I made the ChatGPT soup, and it was good. But I took a picture and tweeted out the soup, and NHK is, I guess, doing a class about ChatGPT and generative, technologies, and they asked if they could use the picture over Twitter. I thought that was funny. Anyway, so next question.
Get Midjourney to make a photo of the soup that ChatGPT gave you the menu for.
Yeah, exactly. I should load the soup into Midjourney and then ask Midjourney to make it something different.
AI Inception.
Yeah, exactly.
And my friend that introduced me to this NVIDIA concept has the bridge between the Midjourney and his 3D printer now.
Yeah.
And
so that's things are starting to happen.
Food is next is the point.
All the recipes I've done so far have been great.
Earl Grey hot.
Yeah. Next question.
Alexander Knight in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, asking, Rode has announced a new firmware update for Rodecaster 2 that allows submixes, including what goes out through the balanced outputs. This allows you to send a mix minus to your camera or switcher.
Go ahead, Courtney.
But I haven't seen. I'll have to look at it because I have one of those, and I'm speaking on it now. Is the ability to route something to the headphones that is not routed to the mix bus. So bring something in that does a mix minus to the headphones only. Like I could bring comms in and have it only go to the headphones, but not go to the main output. I'll have to see if it does that, but I don't. In their example, it doesn't seem to have headphone mix as a output channel.
And Alex, have you already played with this? Is this already something that you do you have that?
No, but I have played with the Rodecaster in the past, but it definitely makes me want to buy one.
Yeah, exactly. It's good. It's a good feature ad. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, first thing comes to mind, IFB, perhaps patching phone conversations in from people in different places. You don't want to send their voices back to them necessarily. All that kind of stuff. It just seems like it's becoming more and more of a broadcast device.
It's cool. It's cool. Little. What was the price on the Rodecaster? Courtney, is it $299? Is that right? Or more?
It was
five
or $600. Yeah,
$500 or $600. Okay. Yeah. Next question.
Chris Fenwick from Emeryville, California asked, I just bought an ATEM shuttle. Any gotchas or tips on setting it up for playback into my little HDMI studio I've got set up here?
Go ahead, John.
I don't understand. Is this the box you told Keenan not to ever use and you would never use a device like this? What changed your mind?
I needed to be able to push a button and have it automatically roll. So I bought it, and I'm hoping that I spent most of yesterday playing with Mixeffect and macros and going down that whole path. And I know we talk about it a lot here, but most of the time I'm just a poser. I'm just hanging out with smart people. So yesterday I was trying to get smart like all y'all, and I'm hoping that I'll be able to make it such that I can press a macro like on Mixeffect and have it actually select the appropriate video and take it and play it. So out of the menu of, I'm going to have 2 or 3 different videos loaded into it. I'm hoping I can do that, but it's a cute little box, I guess.
It's a great little box. There you go, Sky.
I had one of the large control surfaces on the Avid DS, and I ended up using only 1 or 2 buttons on it because I just never got around to. It was always way over there on the console. So I guess where I'm going with this, Chris, is ergonomics. Is put it right there in front of you, and then you as a carpenter and a craftsman in your garage, what tools do you use and why, and consequently find a new excuse to use that tool. Give yourself a silly questions on Friday day or opportunity, and push yourself just incrementally, maybe.
Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Yes, here it is, and I bought it just because it's got a big knob on it, and it's a very nicely weighted knob, and it feels great, and I play with it like one of those little fidget devices.
Do you actually use it? I mean, I get that.
No, I don't use it. I just play with the knob.
It's a really expensive fidget device. I've got better ones for you. I can get ones that are a lot less expensive than that, but they don't look as techy. I admit that it looks more like you're using. So, are you doing much playback?
I'm doing very little playback. Here's the downside: is that it has the same hyperdeck problems that the big boys have, which is you have to have the same file on the SD card, or it ceases to play only one of them. So you have that to deal with, the first one. It has a menu button on it, which is handy, but the problem is it goes out over the main video. So you've got to make sure you're on preview, because if you push that menu button, you're going to end up with a menu going on your main bus, and you don't want that.
Is it the same length as the Extreme? Does it like kind of line up?
I think
nicely?
The profile matches
it does.
The Extreme.
It goes very nicely right along my Extreme. So it sits right in front of me. And did I say that it has a really cool knob on here that's weighted?
So Mitch, does that jog wheel push in and become a shuttle wheel like in the old Sony days?
It does, but it doesn't do it. In other words, it'll shuttle, but it won't jog, at least yet.
It's got the move and no programming.
Yeah, you can hear it.
Interesting.
It's clicking. It's just not doing it. The other thing that I have a problem with it is what it really desperately needs is the ability to easily top and tails files and build a playlist, which you cannot do.
Right. The latest upgrade of Jonas's Playout B does have that ability. You can re-top and tail clips before you put into it. Could you explain again what you said about you have to have one file on the card?
Oh, so all hyperdecks require you to have the exact, and I mean exact, same compression, same number of audio channels, same bits flipped on them as the other ones. Otherwise, it takes the very first one and it shows it to you, and then it doesn't show you any other ones. They don't even show up. So the way to handle that is that, I have a compressor setting that is my hyperdeck set thing, and I just throw them all in there, and I will not even try to put something on a hyperdeck until I throw it through the compressor, even if I'm going from Apple ProRes to Apple ProRes. I make sure that it gets converted to that Apple ProRes, and then we just throw them all on, and it works fine. So it's not like once you're used to it, it's not a big deal. But it is this chaos that is created. It's not well documented, and it's kind of a thing that creates chaos for anybody who buys a HyperDeck of like, why can't I see my other files? And then you just build a system around it, and you don't think about it anymore.
If only I had a friend as smart as Alex Lindsay who may want to email me that compressor setting. That'd be really cool.
Why don't you just tell us? Tell us what it is.
It's not special. It's any ProRes file. I mean, you can theoretically do H.264, but I never do that. So, I mean, mine is probably not what you want because I work in 10-bit a lot. Mine is it's an HQ file. It's an HQ compression, which would be
so it's not a specific setting. You're saying that every file on the HyperDeck has to be the same.
It doesn't have to be a special. It doesn't have to be special. It just has to be the same.
And one more thing, Chris, you cannot record and play back at the same time. So don't think of it as a playback or instant replay.
We're not getting a $300 EBS, is what he's saying.
No, of course not.
Yeah. So, but and now I think that I haven't tried it, but now that you have the folders, you can just throw them in there, and then it'll just pump them out. So it's really, really easy to make that conversion. The reason I made a copy and called it HyperDeck compression is specifically so I just know that that's the one, because there's a bunch of Apple ProRes ones. I don't want to grab the wrong one by accident, but I didn't change anything. It's like an Apple ProRes HQ, but it's called playback, conversion.
You have successfully talked yourself out of one extra email. Thank you.
Yes. All right, next question.
Next question in from David Brady in New York, New York. On the DeckLink Quad 2, how are the ports numbered? I tried sequentially connecting to an ATEM and my assumptions were wrong. Is it 1357246 and what's the ninth port for?
Ninth port is reference, and I do believe it's 13572, and that is so that it's 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 in and out. So if you'd have 4 ins, 4 outs. So that's why it's done that way. It's very confusing. so it took us a little while to figure it out, but it is it's odd and even, and it feels stupid when you do it, but that's what it is it's 4 in, 4 out. Of the system. So it's actually 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4. It's not 1 2 3 5 7. It's 1 2 3 4 out, 1 2 3 4 in. But I think I would have been easier if they just made it 1 through 8. I know. I bet you there were so many meetings that came up with the wrong answer. All right, next question.
From Douglas Carmichael, has anyone worked with Fusion Hub from Peplink? I've heard Peplink devices mentioned on office hours a lot. What unique advantages do they bring?
I think Fusion Hub is basically giving you, and I'm going to make this up right now because I haven't looked at it, but I'm pretty sure that Fusion Hub is the cloud version of what Peplink does to basically backhaul your bandwidth. So what we've had in the past is I have a Peplink somewhere in the field, and I have a Peplink server in my building. So what I'm doing in the field is I'm using the bandwidth from my building. So it basically, comes back there and then uses that bandwidth to go out. And so what I think Fusion is there is that it's in the cloud. So it goes into so basically it does that for you in probably a subscription service that you're actually using the bandwidth in the cloud from the PepWave or the Peplink, and it's useful. You can bond. What it allows you to do. You have to have somewhere on the other end. If you've got a Peplink with 5 modems, it's got to bond somewhere. So what we would do is bond it back to our office and then hand it the internet from our office. But the Peplink would be the Fusion, I believe, is going into the cloud and doing the same thing. Next question.
Eric Billings in Washington, D.C., USA. Now that stock photo providers are exploring AI-generated scenes, the next step seems to be AI-generated video. Does the panel think there will be a viable future for footage resellers like Clipin?
Go ahead, John.
It's a great question. And the image tagging tools from the big companies, Google, Microsoft, are absolutely terrific these days. They've used those tools to catalog and build their models. I'm starting to see tons of tweening now where people are creating 2 images inside of Midjourney and they're tweening between them to do like morphing effects. But video's on its way. You're going to be able to create scenes directly into After Effects and in Premiere soon.
I go with Sky.
And again, Midjourney, hearing from the gentleman that's the head of it, he talked about he's wanting to do 2D well, and next is 3D, but it does take more horsepower. But he's now got 10 million people, and they're breaking the servers and the services because it's growing so quickly. The interest is so deep. So consequently, is it possible? Yes. Are people thinking about it? Absolutely. So stay tuned.
Good, Courtney.
Yeah, luckily Microsoft opened their wallet and gave them millions of dollars to help alleviate their server issue, hopefully. I think we will see video coming up once they master 3D model generation and lighting. Then they can move those 3D models any way you want, have them deliver any dialogue they want generated by a chatbot. So they could have them make up the dialogue and perform a scene. Give me a scene from Shakespeare.
Good, Bill.
One of my many takeaways from yesterday's discussion with Mick Reed of Clippin was that there's so many metadata schemas out there that I'm hoping that services like Clippin or others start to coalesce the entire industry around certain fields or field orders that need to be consistent or should maybe try to be consistent so that there's interoperability in the metadata between these large things. I don't know if it's ever going to happen, but boy, that would sure make the world a lot easier because the schemas out there for metadata are so diverse between things. It's really hard to share data.
Imogen Heap, not Imogen Heap. That's an artist. Imogen Video. Although the two of them work together, it could be really interesting. Anyway, Imogen Video is Google's version of producing. I think it produces 1280 by 768 at 24 frames a second. You put the text in, it gives you a video on the way out. So it's definitely on its way to producing a lot of really crazy and zany videos that are going to be out there. I have to admit, it'll be really interesting to see. I'm very curious if the stock market, like not the stock market, but the stock photo market survives this process, because I think that as it gets more accurate, as our tools, if you see what NVIDIA did, and if you extrapolate that to, I don't, like if I want something that's kind of what I want anyway, because that's what you get with stock photography, is something that's kind of what you wanted. So if you're going to do that, and it doesn't have to get much better before I'd probably be able to produce something better in stock photography than I could with AI. Go ahead, Bill.
You might not have been on earlier, but we were talking, I think, in the pre-show about the fact that Shutterstock now has a generative model built into their Shutterstock service, so that
I know. I just don't know how they. I think it's fine. The problem is that how do they keep up with Midjourney? They're doing their own version of this, but they don't have 10 million people feeding the machine. Like that's the reason Midjourney is pulling away, is because all of the, it gets smarter with everyone using it. Like it's not, that model keeps on getting, better. They get to see, so it is, I think that the problem is that they don't have enough points of reference. That's the problem. I think that's the problem Shutterstock's going to have, is that they can't keep up with something that is, got 10 million users.
But I wonder if the people who look for stock photography, if the training model that they use in Shutterstock will be more advertising oriented, as opposed to the fanciful models that we tend to get out of Midjourney, where everything looks bigger, more interestingly lit. But
you
not
can give it
realistic.
the light model. You can give it the lighting models you want. Like I put glam lighting into a lot of things just because it makes it look like an advertisement. So glam lighting, I've done in the style of Jill Greenberg. So you get the lighting on either side. In the style of, you can put in the style of a lot of folks, and you get a look, that pops out. So you can give it like literally in the style of a photographer, and oftentimes it will nail it. This is, you're like, oh, I see why I did that. I like Rembrandt lighting as well. Yeah, go ahead, Sky.
Make sure you say in the style of, because I did my picture with the Van Gogh, and I came out with one missing ear. So
yeah, you can mix and match them too. So I've done one of my favorite ones to just see what happens is I'll say in the style of H.R. Giger with Rembrandt lighting, and you get just Midjourney just goes absolutely crazy. Like it just goes, you are crazy, and I will give you a crazy photo back. And like like a mechanical octopus. Anyway, next question.
Chris Taylor from Carlsbad, California asks, why does Zoom occasionally pulse the focus zoom of the camera feed?
I don't think it's pulsing. I think that what you're talking about is a dropping resolution and coming back up again, and that usually means you've got a bandwidth issue. So I think that the pulsing that you're seeing is it dropping to a lower resolution, which will look like it's popping just a little bit because of the resolution changing, and then when it pops back up, it'll. So it probably means that you're probably going to see a little message at the top of Zoom at nearly the same time that says your internet is unstable, or look for it. It kind of pops up and disappears, but that really sounds like a resolution shift. Yeah, go ahead, Mitchell.
Isn't that have something to do also if you're in the gallery view, that if somebody pins you, changes the resolution to fit that?
It can. If someone pins you and it's requested, it also may cause your webcam to pop back. So if you've zoomed in on your camera and you're in gallery view, sometimes the first time that a webcam is requested full resolution, a lot of the cameras will go to a known position, which is usually really zoomed out, which is one of the main reasons I would never jump into an important meeting with a webcam because I'm always scared that it's going to do something weird, and I kind of build my frame the way I want to build it. Next question.
And it's from Gilberto Espeshi from Santa Cruz, Bolivia. Is there a way to manually push text from a Word document line by line onto the screen like subtitles?
Go ahead, Mitchell.
I can tell you what not to do. Copying, pasting into a program like After Effects in order to accomplish this. Microsoft Word has all this debris that it adds to anything, so it's best to do it from a text document if you're going to do it. So I guess the workaround would be Word transferred to a text document, then bring it into whatever program you want to push it.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I actually wrote software to do this once for a failed comedy pilot, but because they had to do subtitles that appeared on the screen, a translation of Spanish into English that appeared on the screen so the audience would laugh at the right time. And so I had to manually load the script in, the translation in, and click it onto the screen just ahead of before the person said it so the laugh would happen at the right time. Anyway, I had to write custom software, but you could maybe take teleprompting software and size the window down to like an eighth of the screen, and then choose the font size. It's the right size, and just scroll it up. But as far as parceling it out a sentence at a time, I think it would require something manual. Maybe some closed captioning software is out there that can work off of a canned file and manually to take next line, next line, next line. You might be able to trigger it that way with captioning software.
Good, Bill.
One interesting thing that FileMaker Pro does of all the things is it does text calculations. You can easily program find the carriage return or find a character like a semicolon that you put into things, and then get X number of words from that and then return that as a value. And you could build something in there, I'm pretty sure, that would allow you to do what you're talking about, take a fixed group of words and then export them as individual pieces.
Yeah, I think that one thing to look at is also there's a piece of software called Prompt Smart. And really what it's designed to do is be a teleprompter for someone who doesn't have a teleprompt operator. And so what it does is it listens to your voice and it actually just starts scrolling up. It is not as good as a teleprompt operator. I can tell you, I've used it. I use it at home because I don't have a teleprompt operator. And so if I want to read a text, I can take my text file and I can throw it into this thing and it pops up on my teleprompter. And I literally just start reading and it just starts scrolling with me reading. And so it does it all by itself, matching that. And it does a pretty good job. The problem is teleprompter does it nice and smoothly and it tends to jump a bit. It's trying to find something. So as someone who knows what a teleprompt should look like, I know that it isn't as good, but can I read it? Absolutely. Once you get used to it, you can absolutely read it. What you could do if you wanted something to show up at the bottom of the screen is put that software up. And you could put the text, you could build a window, just cut out a window of it. And as it goes by, you could key it in there, put it into something that you want to do below, and it would follow along with the text. So I don't know if it's manually in that area, but it could be another thing. Another thing that you could do is you could take it all into Keynote and put every one of those on all the text that you wanted on a frame. And now you're just going frame, 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 frame. So you have all the, you would just, and you could probably do it all in one slide. You just make it on objects that just say next, but it would probably be easier to do it with multiple slides because you could edit them easier. But otherwise, you could put them all in as objects that just fade in, fade out, fade in, fade out, fade in, fade out. But stacking it all in, depending on how long it is, stacking it all into one slide might make it unstable. so multiple slides, but you could have them. You could even have them zoom out and zoom back in, and you could have them fly in, fly out. No, I wouldn't do that. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I was going to mention that the problem you run into is that if you want to keep it to a certain area of the screen, lower third, let's say, you have a problem if you want to get a whole sentence on to pop on. You have to change the font size from line to line, and to make it fit. Otherwise, it'll run off or it won't be on there. It's going to have to scroll. So it depends on what you're trying to display, and this is the problem I ran into. And when I conquered it by writing the program that would actually have the a delimiter to delimit the end of the line that I wanted to put on the screen, and a font size with each line. So I just put those in delimited by certain characters on that line in the Word document, and it would bring up the line, set the font size, and put it on the screen. And until I hit the space bar, and it'd bring up the next one, put it on the line, and change the font size on the fly for each individual line. And I'd run through it once and change the font size, and then would remember it. So it's a fairly complex process, and I don't think you're going to find anything that can do it automatically based on just a Word file.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, it's interesting how some questions in the show really capture everybody's imagination. The real question is, do you have to be able to do it live, or are you going to post it? I wasn't going to mention the Keynote hack that Alex mentioned, but that's what I do. When I have to make, a lot of times when I make subtitles, I have to make them in a very specific style. The clients are asking for, I need these colors and I need this font, and I don't want it centered. I want it over here because I want to have room for the bug or whatever it is. And so because of that, the typical subtitling tools normally don't give you that much flexibility. So I end up doing it all completely manually. The idea of changing the font size, Courtney, would drive me crazy because I think your eye wants to pin register to a position. That's why I always justify left. And if it's changing size, I just think it would drive my mind crazy, at least me. So what I do is I agree with what Mitch said, a bunch of junk in the Word file. I put it into a simple text document. I then adjust the width of the column until it fits in the predetermined size that I want it to be on the screen. And at that point, I just copy and paste 2 lines at a time into, I use Keynote because I can create a little background, I can make it transparent, I can do all the stuff, I can make it all exactly the way I want, and I just export a bunch of PNGs and drop them into my editor. But again, the real question for Gilberto is, are you trying to do it live or not?
Next question.
Alexander Knight in Vancouver, BC, Canada. With an extreme ISO and Blackmagic cameras, I understand you can replace the 1080p files with the RAW versions. Is there a hack to do this with non-Blackmagic cameras and have them in sync?
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, unfortunately, Alexander, the hack is to just do it. I mean, you could walk around the room and hit record on all the different cameras, or you could ask your camera guys, hey, everybody, RAW camera. You could do that, and then you're going to have to bring all that stuff in and sync it up. Hopefully you have matched timecode. If you don't, you're going to use a clapperboard or just sync the audio. I mean, I'm sure there's a way to do it. And in terms of doing it in an automated fashion, somebody will figure out how to do it. But right now, the Blackmagic way is really the sexiest way to pull it off.
Go, Jesse.
We haven't gotten this fully automated, but we have gotten this down to about 3 to 5 minutes when we get into our post environment. I'm not going to show you the full process, but I'm going to try to give you enough of an overview that you can get done what you need to get done. So what you're seeing here is an interview we did. 2 of the people are actually in the room, and 1 is coming in through Zoom, and we want to replace the Zoom footage. So the first thing we do is we find that footage in the media pool, and I'm going to lean in because I'm on a small monitor. Thank you for your patience there. So we find that in the media pool. We change the clip color to something very obvious. I'm going to go pink on this one. If it stops doing flags. I apologize. It's a very small monitor, but it'll pick up speed once I get this cleared. There we go. And what you do then is you lift this up you lift all the pink clips to the next level, and then I'm going to show you what we do on the second timeline. So we've got all the pink ones up on a secondary timeline. We sync using the audio for the replacement footage, and you'll see that the replacement footage is quite different from the what we recorded on the ISO. And then simple as can be, you take every remaining clip and just drag it down, and that will delete all of the footage that you don't need from the replacement footage. You can turn off your old footage, and now we have the replacement footage on a timeline alongside of our raw footage from the camera.
Go ahead, Bill.
That seems weird to me only because I use Final Cut, and there's a thing called compound clips in Final Cut. And if you put your clips in your original clip in a compound clip and then use that to populate the A/B stuff in the timeline, if you go back and replace the low res compound clip source with a high res, it just ripples through the whole thing in one movement and fixes it all.
Just make sure audio gets into that camera, all the cameras, because you can match with audio, and it just makes it easy. So anything will work with the audio stuff. You just need to make sure that you're capturing a clean feed to that camera. Next question.
From Matthias Utilja from Helsinki, Finland. When to use power conditioners in a rack and what it does? Do you plug all items, PC, mixer, converter, etc., to it, or some of them with just regular AC power strip?
Go ahead, Nigel.
So I think you have to separate out in your mind power conditioners and surge protectors. So if you have very expensive stuff, put surge protectors behind it if you are not happy with the power coming into the house. Conditioners can go from cheap to very, very expensive. And that's all about the equipment on the other side of them. So if we were going to put a $250,000, hi-fi audio 2-channel system in, we would put a conditioner in to make sure we were sending the cleanest power we could, because the people will hear the difference. So lots of it depends on the nature of the quality of the power you're getting in and the delicate nature of the equipment on the other side.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yes, it's I have these in my racks, and there's different types of them. Most of them are just surge protectors. They're not really they don't really do any voltage conversion or anything. They'll trap with metal oxide varistors. They will trap a spike or something if somebody turns a motor on and there's a voltage spike at the line. They may trap those. But the main thing I use them for is power control. Mine has 8 plugs along the back, and it has 8 switches on the front, so that I can individually turn stuff on and off from the front panel, and all the plugs are on the back panel. So it keeps the distribution on the back side of the panel or inside the case. And it allows me to turn things off that I don't need them or turn them on as I need them. And I get an indication with a light on the switch, which things are on and which things are off. And it does the added thing of spike protection, but it doesn't do very much. Furman makes some power conditioners that have some chokes in them and things like that to prevent high frequency switching noise from getting out into your equipment. But other than that, it's mainly surge protectors, I think.
You go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I think a power conditioner like Nigel was discussing makes a lot of sense. At least for me, I have problems here with our power where we get what are called sags, where the power drops low but doesn't go completely out. And a surge protector is not going to touch that. You need a conditioner that's going to boost the power if it needs to be boosted and reduce it if it's too high. Those two things work well with very sensitive gear. I think that Nigel is referring also to hi-fi systems where you've got very sensitive preamps and amplifiers, and you can hear when the power supply is definitely not being properly supplied with the right sine wave voltage.
Good. Alex?
Yeah, so Furman makes a lot of really good products. I use power conditioners not just to protect the equipment from overload, but for actually reducing or lowering the overall noise floor. I have the Radial Power 1. I've got 2 of them in my rack, and they're both on separate circuits. So in addition to having the MOV protection in there, they do have stuff in here that filters out RF interference, and it says AM radio signals out of the power line, that type of stuff. So I think that's pretty important too.
Yeah, and generally for our racks, we're using UPSs. So we don't do any production without UPSs. So those are our conditioners. Next question.
Next question coming in from myself. The question is, what's the future of AI providing stock footage with isolated backgrounds, like an alpha or a white background?
Go ahead, Bill.
I think it's really bright. I mean, there's a whole thing in audio called stems where you have individual breakouts of instruments. It's very similar to what people understand from things like After Effects or Premiere with layers. And you can go in and manipulate the layers. I think that's going to eventually end up coming to all sorts of stock footage as well, with composites at least, maybe not camera originals that were shot at one time, but as people make these things like we're seeing Midjourney and things like that are compositing things, it wouldn't surprise me at all to see them putting together a system where the individual stem layers are provided along with the clip content that you buy.
Go ahead, John.
On Adobe's site, it actually says generative AI content, last updated January 17th. Want your content made using generative AI tools to be accepted in Adobe Stock Collection. Find out how to submit authentic assets and meet our quality, legal, and technical standards. So Adobe's being very, very careful, but they're allowing submissions to come into AI. They're going to do it.
Go ahead, Javier.
I agree with Bill. I think it's gonna be super dependent on what you can do with it, because you can ask for it to create something with a different background. I mean, white backgrounds is what we've been doing to take the background out of a stock photo of an object or a person or something. When you can ask it for a different background, you can also like draw this thing with this kind of background, or for this kind of use, like to use on a print or to use on a screen or to use on this, and it will take your input into account, or even like create I don't know, like a dog with this background, so you can use your input as the background, and with the generation would take that into account. So like I think like background, white backgrounds or alpha are like more deliveries, and when you're creating from zero, you're not constrained to those deliveries. You can ask it for, I'm going to use it like this, so take that into account and give me a different layer for the background, or just like take into account my background for the lighting, or like all that. It opens up the whole different paths.
Go ahead, Courtney, real quick.
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of time before Midjourney just puts in its generation program. You could ask for transparent background, and it'll generate a Targa file or a TIFF, any of the file formats that support a alpha channel, and it can generate an alpha channel along with your image. If you say transparent background and then describe the object that you want in the foreground, it should be able to do that pretty quickly. It would be a simple programming test to change that with all the neural networking that's going on in the background. That'd be probably pretty easy fix.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I'd like to be able to make changes for commercial photography type thing. If I need to move somebody over here or on the left, make room for a product shot. Having that ability to move the elements around are very important for still and eventually for video.
Next question.
Next question in from Nigel Desaw in Austin, Texas. With the DeckLink Quad 2, are the outputs standard SDI cables or something else?
Yeah, they are a little bit smaller. There's two small things that you can get. There are little SDI connections, but this is not them. These are DIN, I believe they're DIN 1.0/2.3s. So they are a little snap. They're a little thing that snaps on, and so it basically, you push it in and it will connect to it, and then you have an SDI cable. And you have a couple different options there. You can have it basically go out as a SDI male coming out of the back, like it would be out of the back of your, so you can get a short cable that's like 6 inches long, that's DIN 1.0/2.3, and you push it in, and it's 6 inches long, and it comes out, and it just acts as if it was another connector and an SDI signal that you would have. And then you can hook your SDI signal to that little connector. The other option is to have it be I can't remember whether male or female, but you can have it be the cable. So the ones I have for my Extreme are longer. So they're like 2 feet long or 3 feet long. And they are the DIN that goes into the quad, and then it comes out, and it actually is I guess it's the male that would go into your switcher. So then I just have this like kind of short feed of doing that. And so you can do either one. You can get them, most of the time we buy them as the females, so that you can just put them in, and then they all just kind of hang out as a tail. and then you just put your cables into it. I did it a different way as an experiment because they were both going to be close together. Now I'm not sure if I needed that. So, but you can, and then you can always change them with the barrel. So you can change them out with a barrel to get from one to the other if you pick the wrong choice. I'll try to find the right ones that I'm not that happy with the ones I got. They are all 1.0, 2.3s are not made the same. So they're definitely not. There are some that are really a pain in the neck, and I got ones that were kind of marginally a pain in the neck to get. Laird, Laird, make the best ones in my opinion. They're a little bit more expensive, but the 1.0, 2.3 connector is just nice. It just pops in and grabs onto it nicely, and it comes off really nicely. And I find that the Laird ones work the best of all the ones that I've used in the past. Sometimes they're hard to get, so sometimes I in a rush, in a pinch, I will use something else and generally regret it. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I bought a bunch that are like this that they have on B&H. I think I got mine from Amazon, but a lot cheaper than $19 a piece. I think they were about $10 a piece, and they seem to work pretty well. The Den to female BNC.
Yeah, and they all work. It's what you're looking for is the creature comfort of how well they connect and how easy they are to get on and off. And why that's important is we're going to take them on and off a lot. If they're hard to get off, if they get stuck in there, or if they don't do it, you're going to move them around a lot more, and that's going to reduce the lifespan of that card. So we found that we can wear those things out, because you also see them in SFPs where they'll have an SFP that has these little things sticking out. So that's what you're looking for there. Next question.
Bob Sturtevant in San Antonio, Texas, asking, I'm used to using software tools for still photography when it comes to high ISO noise. What software or plugins would you recommend for video? I own Premiere and Resolve.
Go ahead, Bill.
The big gun out of the box some years ago was Neat Video. Everybody used it. The only downside is that it took a long time to process video sometime and remove that noise. More recently, I've seen those kind of denoise filtering functions that were, I think, informed by the way they did it with Neat, but come into the software tools. I know that I'm pretty sure they're decent denoising tools. The bespoke tools like Neat Video would give you more control, but there's a lot more available now than there used to be to denoise video.
Go ahead, Jesse.
Resolve has a really nice tool for this. And the cool thing about denoising when you're in a video program is you're not just using adjacent pixels for information. You're using 3 dimensions, so adjacent frames to get that pixel information. It's very easy to find. You go to your color tab, and then go to the far right. You've got this little icon here, and you'll see temporal NR, that's temporal noise reduction. And you can tell it how many frames you want it to sample as it tries to reduce noise on the frame that you're working on. And this will apply it throughout the entire clip, and then you can apply that same grade to multiple clips.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
And if you're coming from still photography, you might recognize Topaz as a plugin. They now make it for video. Their algorithms are good, and now they've got an AI that pretty much does what you're talking about here.
Next question.
Next question in from Douglas Carmichael. Could you use a Peplink device like the SDX Pro for fixed residential use, or are they designed for mobile deployment?
Oh, the Peplink, all the Peplinks are kind of designed for mobile deployment. I mean, it depends on what kind of mobile you're doing, but they're all able to do, they're all kind of designed to work in the field generally. Next question.
Next one from Eduardo Augustine in Panama. I've been using ATEM Mini Extreme and Keen Chroma, but want to improve. For key fill, I'll need SDI outputs and inputs. And which one would you recommend, Ultra Studio or HyperDeck?
It depends on how. It depends. It depends on what you want to. There's 2 things. There's one step between Chroma and doing key fill, and that's doing a Luma. I know that sounds crazy, but if you understand what you're doing with Luma, you can get some very good keys out of it without, so basically what you do is you raise all the blacks in your graphics by about 15%. And if you do that, you're going to find that you won't see it in the broadcast, but you will be able, you have 15% of the black to just key into it. And you can get the chroma, what you're probably noticing with chroma is the jagged edges along curves. Any kind of curve, any angle, anything, the lower chroma sampling in the 422 will cause that to be a problem. And so that's something to kind of, keep conscious to. You can get a lot with Luma. As far as key fill out, you just want to decide how flexible. So an Ultra Studio means that you're choosing to buy a piece of software that's going to do key fill out, like Presenter Pro or Softron or other things that are going to do key fill outputs. The HyperDeck means that you're going to load those files into it and then play them out. The smaller the mini HyperDecks will have the key fill output, but they won't. Getting sound out of that means you have to be in bed, and so it's more complicated. So anyway, so you want to kind of think about how are you getting it into there. The HyperDeck works great, but it's pretty limited every time you want to load things in. If you want to keep on changing things during a show, it's pretty cumbersome. So I'd probably lean towards the HyperDeck and some kind of software that's going to do a key fill out. Again, QLab, MIDI, all those are pieces of software that can do the key fill out. So think about how, if you're going to use a software to do that, or you want it to just be a thing that connects to your computer. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael. Courtney, you mentioned the ATEM MIDI as being a better value than the capture card and an external switcher. Wouldn't the capture card be a better choice because it would work around that ATEM gray issue?
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, capture cards can have bugs too, you see. They could have the same gray issue. And the gray issue really only occurs when you power up the ATEM or you connect it to the USB bus. I haven't seen it happen in the middle of a show unless there's some dropout in the USB bus or there's some disturbance in the force inside your PC. So the gray issue is so rare that it's not really a problem once you're up and running. You know it when you see it, and you recycle it, you restart it, and it goes away. So, and eventually they will fix that bug. So with the other stuff that the ATEM brings, it's a much higher value. I wouldn't worry. I wouldn't sweat the gray screen thing.
Yeah, and by the way, I mean the gray screen is. We've pretty much identified that it's connected to the number of requests between restarts. So if, the fix, a lot of times the production way of approaching things is to just fix things. Like you just figure out, like, what are the steps? If I have to turn like this and then turn like this and then go like this, if I know that will do it all the time, I just get good at doing that. And really the answer there is that if you start every day by restarting your ATEM, you'll never have the gray screen. Like, if you actually restart your now it means you have to save the state or do whatever you're going to do. You're never going to have that problem. It's only when it's left there or you're making a lot of requests. So my wife was actually capable. She has an ATEM now, and she was capable of getting it to happen inside of one day because she turns the camera on and off inside of Zoom all the time because she's used to working with vanilla Zoom and not having an ATEM. So she doesn't put a screen up. She just turns it off. And so she's turning it off on and off all the time. And it turns out you can activate that gray screen really fast if you do that. So if you're turning the Zoom on and Zoom video on and off, it's just not a behavior most of us do. So it was something that kind of exposed that it was just a number of requests that went through. But if you restart relatively often, you're never going to have that. I think it's going to get fixed. So I feel pretty confident that this is what happened is that this is a great example of when you say something's happening, but you can't give specifics, things take a long time to fix for a development. If you go, oh, we know that it happens between 15 and 40 requests or between 20 and 50 requests or whatever, it's going to happen. That is and here's how to reproduce that without having to actually, wait for it to happen. That makes it much faster. And I think that when we got to that point in figuring this out, I think all the gears will start to turn now. so because now it's something that can be tested. All right. We're changing subjects. We're going to talk about SVV. This is the Silicon Video. What is it? Silicon Video. I want to say, Silicon Valley Video. I'll get good at it. So Silicon Valley Video. I think of it as SVG because it's Silicon. It's the Sports Video Group. So Sports Video Group is what started this. This is a Sports Video Group, and SVG is pretty well known for doing a lot of great conferences that are, it's Sports Video Group, but it's really live. A lot of people in SVG are really just people that are in live video. So there's a lot of these little conferences that have, not little, but 500 people that are coming together for these conferences where the CTOs show up or other things and talk about where they're going and what they're planning. So SVG's been around for a long time, and there's been a lot of pressure to look at corporate video, enterprise video, the kind of things that a lot of us do more carefully, because our industry is growing faster. So our industry is growing faster than broadcast. And so there's been a lot of pressure to do that. So SVG really looked at that and looked at the possibility of doing an event. I've been kind of in discussion with them about it over the last 6 months or whatever to kind of think about that. And they put on this conference, and I'll see if I can show it to you. Well, the first thing I'll show you is I've got a couple photos here to show you. And there's a couple things that happen that are kind of cool. There's visits that you get to do. So for some of us, we're able to go to a couple things before the show. So there's like kind of tours, and SVG does this a lot too. So there's these little tours that you go to. So we visited EA. So EA Sports has their own studios, and so I'll show you a couple of photos. I'm probably not going to show the control room photos because we're going to try to get them on. Joseph Lynch, who runs EA Studios, is an old friend of mine, and so we got to talk a little bit, and I think we'll get to have them on. But I'll show you a couple of the set shots anyway. So here's EA Sports. So what's interesting about it, a couple of things that we learned while we were there was that they built the whole thing because they have to flip these studios. And it was the same thing that I've talked about a lot, is that what they realized is they're going to do all these events in all these remote locations, and they have to build a kit, and they have to go out there, and they have to build a set, then they throw the set away, and then they do it again and again and again. And they're just setting, Joe said, literally just setting cash on fire. So they're setting cash on fire when they do this. And so they built this great studio. And what's interesting about the studio is because they have to use it for a lot of different shows, everything that has a logo in that studio is on a screen. So they can flip all those logos, really, really fast to the other show that they're going to do. So they can have a setup inside of their kit. They're using a Ross, I think, a couple Ross switchers, and they can they hit a button and they just kind of flip the whole set into another look. Let me see if I can get my keyboard in the right place. This is another. So basically, this is one side of the set. If you turn 60 degrees, you get a different set. So this is a very multi-purpose. This was a conference room. This was a conference room and some meeting rooms that they tore out and made available I think it was during COVID, or either right before COVID or during COVID. They just had a lot of space, so they built these out because EA went from not doing a lot to doing 6 shows a week or something like that, or 6. Really, really busy during COVID because there was no other sports. So this was a really great opportunity for them to kind of move forward. So you'll see this is kind of the brick wall industrial look there. A little cool thing about the table there. There's your it's a slightly bigger version of what Mitch and I use for the talent there to have both be able to do talkback and so on and so forth. And underneath that, of course, is their monitors, so they can look down and see a variety of information that's there. So and then this is a separate room, but they've got a little green screen in there, and they've got a place where the gamers can kind of hang out. So this was kind of the shows you a little bit about their production. Of course, I shot wide shots, so you can see kind of the lighting. You can see that this is the grid that we talk about a lot. Up above. So this is this is how once you start building that studio, this is what you want to think about. And again, you can see that the logo down here is something they can swap out. It all has a certain look. Now, one of the things they said is for other shows, they now have the ability to kind of wrap this with another look as needed. So they have kind of just a way that you kind of pin things up to it, and it'll just change the whole look of it as well. So they've made it very, very flexible. It's a really, really efficient. And again, I'm really excited to hopefully get them on at some point to talk about it because super efficient studio put together. And if you have questions about any of this stuff, go ahead and raise your hand as we go forward. But let me go ahead and the next thing that we did, and I wasn't allowed to take any photos of the next one, but I can talk about it. So the next one we went to is Dolby. This is just a representative photo of what we were talking about. And what Dolby had a demo of HDR, and it was brutal. Like, it was just the most brutal. So what they had was they were showing us I do a lot of work in HDR, and so I'm usually living between one. So the standard dynamic range is 100 nits. Okay, and that's just a measure of brightness. I work in about 1,000 to 2,000 nits, depending on the project. So it's, we usually grade to 1,000 nits, and then we can expand it from there to up to 2,000 nits. And so they would do that. They would say, here is something, and we'd look at something that looked totally fine at 100 nits, and then they go, well, here's what it looks like at 1,000 nits, and they'd show it to you. Oh, that looks better. But they had a 4,000 nit. They had a 4,000 nit a screen there, and they said, and this is what it looks like at 4,000 nits. And then you could barely look at the 1,000 nits, and you definitely, the 100 nits just looked like mud. Like it was, and they hadn't changed anything other than what your reference point was. So then suddenly you saw a 100 nit that looked fine a second ago, and a 4,000 nit that looked, and it was interesting. They did point out that, the sun is like 1 million nits or whatever. And so, and when you look at a wall, like what was interesting is that they went out and started sampling things. I guess there's a little tool that they have that they can point at surfaces, and it'll tell you how many nits that surface is. And they said, well, people can't have an extended time where they're looking at 4,000 nits or 10,000 nits or whatever. They showed a wall like in an alley, and they were like, we measured this is 9,000 nits. Like the wall is 9,000 nits. Like we're used to looking at a lot of nits. And so I will say that it shifted. Like you could feel we were watching it. They made a short film with Blackmagic cameras, and but they made a short film, and what was fascinating was when it went to the bright area, you could feel your irises just go, what you don't feel when you're watching most TV. So what was interesting is that it looked sharper because with more contrast, it actually at 1080p, it just looked the image looked sharper than it did before. So, and more 3D, like you felt like you saw depth that wasn't necessarily there. So it was a really fascinating demo. So that happened the day before. This is the let me cut back to this. This is let's see. This is what it looks like when you're there. So SVG. So part of it is a small expo, and I'll show a couple things that I noted. I didn't take a picture of every booth there. I probably could have. There was only 12 or 15 booths, but and it's nice. I like little booths. So that I can move from one to the next, but it is hard to see what's going on. So it's about 500 people that showed up, for this, and this is the beginning of it. So this is kind of what it looked like in the scene. So you had a little screen up front. I thought the lighting worked pretty well. Of course, I go to these things not just for the content, but I'm looking at how they run the event. So you'll see a couple of me like doing research. I take pictures of everything, but we were sitting in the back here, and so you can kind of see the layout. They had like 5 seats up there to talk. Here's the lighting grid, because that's what I do. so there's kind of your lighting. Here's kind of the widest shot of what this looks like. This is in the Computer History Museum that's there, and so this is I guess they have a theater there, it's very nice. I would definitely do an event here again. Here's some of the close-ups of the lights, because that's what I do. There's the projector, so you can see what's there. So that, and this is all kind of pre-built into that system. They were using 2 Blackmagic 6Ks, so with B4 lenses on them to shoot it. So one wide, one close-up. Here's if you're wondering, this is a pretty typical like in the room event production without like a lot of live streaming. Just recording and so on and so forth. This is pretty much what you see in most places. So you'll see the kind of the GAC that's all there, and then they just put up some curtains around it. You've got a couple fins for the wireless, and everything just kind of works. I did get out to we were looking out here, and this is the new Clearcom chat. This is their new FreeSpeaks. And it's very shiny. Just in case you're like, as someone who's used FreeSpeaks for 10 years, this is the new one I hadn't seen, and it was very shiny looking. It's 5G, and the challenge, and we talked about it there, is that the 5G just doesn't get through a lot of things. So if you're looking for high density, belt packs, then the 5G makes a lot of sense. So if you want like 100 belt packs inside of a small studio or inside of a small space, They work, or 50 of them or whatever. They work really well. If you're trying to get through a long distance or try to figure out a lot of things, they may not be the right solution. So one of the things we were talking about is they're kind of looking at finding ways to use the 1.9, in another form factor, in this form factor, because the form factor is really nice. A lot of good stuff there. We had a lot of good talks. They have one of the things we discussed with Clearcom was that they now have an Agent IC for the Mac and PC that's licensed, that's licensed out so you can open it. It was always mobile before. It was just iOS. So they have that for their Eclipses, and we're going to probably bring them on to talk a little bit more about all of those solutions in the not too distant future. We had a good conversation there. I know a lot of guys there. so anyway, we had a good conversation there, but I think that we're going to have them come on and talk a little bit more about it. This is I talk a lot about this when people say, well, how do I do KVM? This is KVM at scale. Like this is so IHSE, and I kind of I thought it'd be useful to show what these look like. And what's important here is to see that this is modular right here. So you define what you want in there, and so that is kind of a modular setup. Oh, I want this. You can give them the kind of the breakout, and these cards come in and out. So what do you want to have go in? What do you want to have go out? To connect those. So they're showing a couple different options here. So this is like when you talk about like KVM, this is, routing all of this, but this is the big game when it comes to KVM. so anyway, but they're not very big. They're not big devices, but when we work in production facilities, we see them relatively often. Also had a great conversation with Calrec. So this is and I don't have the brand or the model number, but this is a really cool setup. So Calrec is in about 80% of the broadcast trucks in the United States, and of course, because SVV is connected to SVG, a lot of these folks kind of came over from that, and but Calrec has this, so that server box is actually basically 3 mixers. So that little box over there, that 2U is basically 3 digital mixers, 512 inputs, 512 outputs. It can it's capable of that. And then the channels that are managing, depending on what you license, is 20, 40, 80, 120 channels that you can work with. It's got a ton of DSP built into it. And it can run completely from that laptop, so that it is really designed. I mean, we've seen this with Yamaha and Behringer and so on and so forth, but these Calrecs, basically are really just built to be run remotely. And they have this version will do 5.1, the bigger version will do Atmos. But you can also tie via VPN. You can tie those controllers that you see there into them remotely as well. There's some limitations to it as far as some of the feedback stuff to those mounts, but the main thing is that we're looking. I mean, I'm looking for some remote remote mixing solutions, and the Calrec, this is the kind of the high. We kind of consider Calrec kind of the high end solution to make this actually work. So anyway, so this is something we spent some time on. We think we're going to be able to get them in about a month to show what they're doing. And we might even try to play with a mix of doing a show for a week or two or something like that in the Calrec. So we'll see if people are up for that. But if people are willing to experiment with it over a weekend or whatever, we're gonna kind of play with that. So expect us to spend a little bit more time looking at it. It is pricey. It's not in our world. This is in Calrec's world. It's relatively inexpensive. Their mixers usually start at about $250,000 each. This starts at about 25,000. so it's not the same cost structure as the X32 or the Q01, but there's an enormous amount of power in DSP, and it's going to be rock solid because it's there. So I had a good conversation with them, kind of talking through that stuff there. And then here is let's see, this is Steve Wozniak was did the closing discussion, and he's really, I mean, you really get how he got there. Like, he was talking about how he learned how to build computers. I guess there was all the drawings for all these new computers, and every computer he would redesign it from scratch. Like, every new computer that came out, he'd look at the drawings and then he'd try to build them, and then he'd try to, rebuild these things when he was a kid, just putting them all back together so he'd understand how they worked. he was constantly reading all the manuals and putting all the stuff together to figure it all out. And it was funny. He said there was a couple of funny things that he said a lot of funny things, but one of the funny things he said is that I came up with a new idea, about once a year. I'd have a new invention about once a year, and Steve Jobs would come over and make money with it. Like, that's what kept us going for a long time. It's like he goes, I'd come up with something, and then Steve Jobs would come over and go out and make money with it, and then it would keep us going for a little while longer. And I guess they did that. I always thought that they kind of started in 1976, but it sounded like they'd been doing that for like 10 years. Like it was, so he'd been doing. They've been doing it for, a long time of building the Blue Box and building the other things and building all these other pieces. But they weren't really a company. It was just kind of like them putting it together. So, and then he said, it was really hard for him because they had an investor that came in that wanted to put money in, but they said he had to quit his job at Hewlett-Packard. He's like, I'm working on a state-of-the-art calculator. Like, how can I leave? How can I leave? I'm working on the best calculator in the world. And he was it was very hard for him to separate. The other thing that I think they were talking about, education, and he said it just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the information that you tell kids. What matters is that if they care about it, they're going to learn it. He goes, if they're inspired and they care about the subject, they'll figure it out. Like he goes, they don't need the information. They don't need you to give them the information. They need you to give them the inspiration, to learn. And he said, and so it was just and he did mention, I guess in San Jose, his old school, he used to teach basic computer programming. And I was like, how much pressure is on the kids to be taught by Steve? If Steve Wozniak can't teach you how to program. Anyway, so that was so Steve was a lot of fun to have there. It was really kind of a rambling, but and here's the thing that I noticed is he had a Q&A at the end. So people asked him a couple questions, and what I was left with very quickly was I could have just had the Q&A. Like, it was great to hear some of his backstory, but I didn't really need him to talk about stuff. He was so interesting when people started asking him questions. I was like, why don't we just have him up here? And we had to cut off for some reason. There was some cutoff for timing or whatever. And I was like, we could have just left him up there answering questions. If he was willing to. He seems like the kind of guy that would just answer questions. But if he was willing to, just let him answer questions for an hour and a half. Because it's Steve Wozniak. And so anyway, so it was a lot of fun. Let's see what else we got here. Andy and I were there. so Andy and I, I talked about digital first events. So in the morning, and then I interviewed Andy for 15 minutes. So we actually did, and I think I got some photos here. I didn't quite get them all in. I had a little bit of as you may have noticed at the beginning of the day, I woke up this morning with a fire in a production fire that I had to put out. So I didn't get quite everything put in there, but I think that Michael Slade captured a couple of me up there. I'll try to find them for you. Yeah, so I think that, and we talked to Andy about, Zoom's production and everything else. And then we talked about I was hosting a metaverse talk at the end of the day. So we had a couple things there. It was an interesting overall. I would say that it's a really interesting conference. I think it's going to go a long way. I think that there's a lot of interest by the vendors, definitely, because they really, and that's what you have to. Sometimes you can just do it like we do it, which we're interested in the subject matter, but having vendors interested is really useful because they have, they want to spend money to actually make these events possible. Because this event was free; it was all paid for by those tables, and so we saw B&H there and all these other vendors and everything else, and they're very interested in this market. And SVG already has a lot of those contacts, and so and it was a who's who. I saw friends from Apple and Facebook and Google and all these the people who run all these events for all these companies. I wasn't sure if they would actually show up. Like they were. But the folks that I knew, I wasn't sure that. I was like, is this going to be just a bunch of folks that are just kind of trying to get into it or trying to find the next job? And it really did turn out to be a lot of the people who make decisions in Silicon Valley about production were all in the audience and all looking there. And so it was a great, this gets back into what people bring up, I will admit, The hallway discussions were really useful. And hanging out, talking to folks about it, it's good. But it gets into the point is that we want to figure out a way that people who can make it can have those hallway discussions and have those discussions. And this is what I was talking about for Digital First. It's just that we have to make sure that the audience online, who will be much larger, needs to be able to have that great experience too. Like needs to have maybe not the same experience, but an excellent experience that they want to come back over and over and over again. I definitely think the folks that came to this one definitely had the experience that they want to come back. I mean, I think that they really felt like it was necessary and good. But I think that so that's what I was talking about, because I think the Digital First makes sense in the sense that there are people who can and want to come back, and they want to have lunch and they want to have the drinks and do all the things that they do and have those hallway conversations. What I did most of the time, which is what I usually do, I can report a little bit on what's in there, but what happens is that when everyone goes into the plenary to talk, I go out and talk to all the vendors because then I have time to myself and I can have conversations and I can talk for a long time and figure things out. And so I spent a lot of time with CalRec and ClearCom and a couple other folks to really, get the information that I needed. We did run into a lot of people who watch office hours that you don't see every day. Like people were just coming up to me about every 15 minutes, like saying, wow, I really like office hours. So no pressure, but it's like network folks and production folks are definitely watching the show, because they all said hi. So anyway, so I think that there is definitely a crossover between what we're doing and what they're doing. That's I think pretty interesting. Yeah. Go ahead, Courtney.
You mentioned metaverse that you spoke either on a panel or did a segment on it. Did the summit itself appear in the metaverse? Was it hosted in the metaverse? Or
it wasn't even streamed. So I mean, when I signed up for this and people found out that it wasn't being streamed anywhere, I got I don't know how many Discord and texts I got of the irony. The first one I actually show up at, it's not. No, they recorded it and they're gonna post it. So we'll make sure that all of you get to see all those discussions. But no, it wasn't. I think a lot of it was obviously discussing the ideas. One thing I will say that I really like about SVV, and I assume that SVG is the same, is that there weren't multi-tracks. There was just one big room. We're gonna. What I'd like to see more of is longer sessions and less of them, so that we can really dig into them a little bit more, because they were like a half an hour each, and so you just kind of scrape across the surface. But having it all in one room is so much nicer. Like we're all in the same conversations. When we walk out into the hallway, we all saw the same things. If we're inspired by something, we're all talking about it. And I saw this with TED a long time ago when I went to a TED Africa, and I really felt like, wow, this is a much better experience. I think that this is great that way, and I hope they keep that design. I hate tracks. Go ahead, Sky.
I just got to do a behind the scenes about Steve at one point, and he started in that same geographic area in the Homebrew Club, and this feels like at the beginning of personal computers and things. So I would be fascinated just to have him reminisce and talk about current struggles, but also how it's kind of the same just 40 years later. But what I'm hearing you say is that in person created a nutrient-rich environment, and so how do you get that in this two-dimensional media?
And what I talked about is what I talk about here all the time is that we should have those in-person events. We should just take the speakers and put them in another room, so that when they're talking, the big point that I make here and that I made there was that if we just take the speakers and we put them in another room, they can be in the same building, but if we just put them in another room and put them in front of a bunch of screens, and they can still talk to that audience. But the reality is we did a whole bunch of sessions. There were almost, other than Steve Wozniak, there were no questions, just because of how tightly packed it was, that there was no reason not to put them. I mean, I guess it's nice to have people on a stage. It's kind of creature comforts, and this one's small enough that you didn't need IMAG because there's only 300 people. But if you had gotten much larger than what it was there, you would have immediately had to switch over to IMAG. And as soon as you switch to IMAG, everyone's looking at a screen anyway. Like it doesn't matter anymore. Once you go over about 500 people, you're going to switch over to, there's enough people far enough back that, and this one, to be honest, would have benefited from IMAG, because we were sitting on a stage, And when you were in the back, you were far enough back that everyone was really small. So at that point, you really could have switched this to IMAG, and then everyone would have been as soon as you put big IMAG is those big returns that you see up there by the stage for those of you who don't do events. So as soon as those go up, everyone just looks at those. Like they never look down again at the stage. And that's what people don't get when they say, oh, they have to be on the stage. I'm like, do they? Do they go? Like as soon as you put those screens up, we're all paying attention to the screens. Now that you want to have them there so that so you might want a bunch of the speakers to be there, but we also give up a huge number of people that would have been easy. They brought one person in virtually, that they brought one person in to talk on the screen. And the problem is they brought it in over SRT because it was more production ready and going to be higher quality. But the problem was it's higher latency. So it feels like that satellite connection, that you have there. So you can have them present like, hey, we're going to throw this off to this person and let them talk. You can't have interaction as soon as you do SRT or Zixi or any of those other things that will give you a more better fidelity in the video, but they're not going to give you the immediacy that you get with Zoom or other platforms like that. So anyway, so I think that it was so I think that putting that person somewhere else and still letting them interact with the audience. They can still say you in the blue shirt, you in the whatever. You still have that interaction, but it simplifies your audio pipeline. It simplifies your video pipeline, and it allows you to make sure what I talked about in the talk is that when you do that, it means the folks in the plenary room are in the front row. The front people in the front row are in the front row, right? And the people in the back row are now more in the front row because now they have something that's the same for everybody. If you had an overflow room, front row. If this event, where I think this event wants to go, or where all these events want to go, is that there's not an SVV West Coast or an SVV East Coast. There's just an event, and it occurs in New York and in Silicon Valley at the same time, and maybe in London at the same time, and everybody has the same experience. And the speakers are coming in on those things, and it's not like in one you feel like you're the outside, and the other one you feel on the inside. Everybody has the same experience, and we can have watch parties in Cape Town and watch parties in somewhere else that people can have in their offices, and we interact with them all as equals. And if you're watching on your phone, I'm interacting with you as an equal because I'm better lit. I have a better audio. I'm able to see everybody and see the information. And it was great that we did this on the week that Tony Robbins did an event for 1.4 million people. Because Tony Robbins did an event for 1.4 million people from his living room from a room in his house in Hawaii. So there is so that was a great backup that we were able to kind of talk to. And the problem is, and one of the things we talked about on the session that I was in, is that the big game is going to be digital events, not digital first events, but digital events like Tony Robbins going to 1.4 million people from his living room, other people doing these virtual events like what we do. This is a digital event, right? There's no live audience or anything else. This is the big game. This is going to be, now that Tony Robbins hit 1.4 million, this is kind of like no one hit $1 billion valuation and then they just started going to 2 billion and 3 billion and 4 billion valuations. It's a mindset. Once Tony Robbins hit 1.4 million, we're probably 12 to 18 months from 10 million. And once we get to 10 million, we're bigger than broadcast. But there are events happening that are bigger than broadcast. And the idea that CES has 100,000 people, you're like, ooh, that feels really small. and it used to feel big. And now it feels like this cute little thing that you were doing before. And the problem is that in a digital event, the audience is going to get used to having all that interaction directly to them. If you go to a hybrid event where the audience, where you feel like you're in the back, where the cameras aren't really directed, people aren't going to value those. And, one of the things the big thing that I talked about in my talk that I did was, what I pay attention to a lot in events is how people feel. How do they feel in the event? How do they feel like the conversation is important, that the brand's important, that the ideas are important, and all of that is driven by how they feel about themselves. How do they feel about themselves in the event? Do they feel connected? Do they feel important? Do they feel heard? Do they feel seen? And if they feel those things, then all those other things become important. If they don't feel important, then the event doesn't feel important. And when you start paying attention to things like sequential attendance, which is, do they show up 4 events in or 4 days in? Those numbers drop really fast when we don't get it right. Next question.
Next question coming into us from Sky Gleason in Seattle, Washington. Who was the summit's audience? Corporate communications, broadcasters, feature film?
Yeah, go Sky.
You've kind of answered all of that, but this was I put in the questions because it was early days. I am curious about the feature film audience, obviously, but you kind of answered most of the questions.
Yeah, what was I going to? Yeah, I think that it was all corporate. I mean, that was the goal. There was a lot of broadcasters there, but it was really focused on the corporate teams that are putting these things together and how they're figuring them out and what they're doing. And they talked a lot about 2110 in the workflow. They talked about so there was some 2110 discussions. There was some obviously some metaverse discussions, some digital background discussions. So there's a couple different discussions there that were pretty interesting of how people are thinking about those. But we saw some folks that are doing some big corporate too, like Accenture was there, and there's a lot of other folks that are doing some stuff. And again, I mostly, as a representative office hours, was like, hey, you should come on the second hour. So I just walked around like, let's bring you all in.
Well, I'm realizing that you had to wear something other than cargo shorts because you were in person.
Oh my gosh, I had to wear a monkey suit. No, I call them monkey suits. I had to have a dress jacket and a dress shirt on.
You look great.
Yeah,
you dress up good, sir.
Yeah. So anyway, I do not enjoy that part at all. Anyway, the further I get away from cargo pants and a flannel is the less comfortable I am. Next question.
From Bo Cordell in Charleston, South Carolina. They had live Q&A during the keynote. Don't tell Alex.
Just for a second. I will say that for the most part, other than not having very well-formed questions, in my opinion, the questions for Steve Wozniak were short. Like people, and they were it was good as from a wetware perspective that they managed that really well. They said, listen, we're going to go through these questions. You got to be fast. Just ask the question. We don't need any build up to it or any other thing that you have there. Still, people did the things that, even within that, I want to ask I have two questions. I have a 2-part question. I have a multi-part question. So people have these things that they want to jump in rather than just asking a clear, this is why I still think that text is better. There is no question that was asked by the audience that was better, especially when they're told to be fast, and there's not going to be any back and forth or anything else, other than expediency. Like they don't have a system to do that. I would have much rather had Mokana in there and everyone asking questions in Mokana in the room and then voting them up and down so that we got the questions that everybody wanted, as opposed to the people that happened to stand up and be called on. So I didn't feel like that was an improvement of that process. I think that I think future ones will be better. So anyway, next question.
Nigel DeSalle from Austin, Texas. Nigel asks, do you get a sense from the people you met of how much impact office hours is having?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Like that was a little affronting about how many people were walking up to me from all kinds of corporate, broadcast, network. Folks were coming up again every 15 minutes, just going, "Oh, I watch office hours," or "Oh, I really picked up a bunch of stuff. We built our studio based on what we saw in office hours. I don't get to see all of them, but I watch them." This is interesting. A lot of people were like, "Oh, I watch them all over the weekend," or "I listen to them all over the weekend." Was a common note of that process. So I was. Because we see who we see. We see who's talking in the event chat. We see who's in Discord. We see who's there, and you don't see all the other people that are in in watching just the YouTubes later and so on and so forth. It was way more than I expected.
Hey, Alex, did any of them say they were time shifting? Like, were they using the indexes and looking for things in there, or did you explore any of that with the people who
I didn't
time shifted?
I didn't ask. They mostly just said they were listening to the shows afterwards. Understood. So there was they weren't really talking about what they were. I didn't ask them that. I think a lot of it was because both because I was on stage, but primarily because of office hours. Most people were coming up to me to talk about office hours. I was in a lot of conversations all at one time. Every time I walked through where there was a lot of people, there was just a lot of people coming up and talking about that. And they're less about my stage appearance and more about office hours. Like, you know, they just want to come over and say hi and say that they watch office hours. And so it was interesting. Like I didn't expect that much. I expected to get a lot from being on the stage. I didn't expect a lot as much input from that. So yeah. Next question.
Next question coming in from Alexander Knight in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. Were there any big broadcasters that approached you about office hours and expressed interest in how you're able to achieve such a high level of quality?
It wasn't. There were some big broadcasters that did talk to us about it and said it was useful. They didn't talk a lot about that specifically, although a handful of folks did say, you know, when they use office hours. So the couple people that talked about the fact that they use office hours when people in their organization say that you can't have a high quality video, over Zoom, they use office hours as the example, and that seems to be pretty common. Like we become kind of the proof of like it doesn't have to look that way. Like and so I think that's definitely something that that popped up a lot. That people are using us as an example. And that's why we push so hard. I mean, that's why we push hard for our audio, why we push hard for our video, is because we are, hopefully showing people that it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be bad audio and bad video and all the things that are there. It really can be something different. It's not the platform that does that. It's lack of participant attention. Go ahead, Alex.
I just fully expected some people to be a little salty about how that office hours has spent a lot less money than these broadcasters, and you look so much better. There's a lot of jealousy there.
We did another Michael Krasny show with Larry Diamond yesterday, and one of the things that he said in the prep was that he's on a lot of shows for CNN and a lot of other folks, and he said no one's ever asked me about the audio. Like weird, because Shannon was being very specific about that. He's like, no one ever asked about the audio. They always try to make sure my lighting's right and my camera's right, everything else. And I was like, we care, like we care about that. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, I hate to ring our own bell, but we've talked before about this being one of a kind. That there's nothing else out there like this. Do you think people are catching on and thinking, wow, maybe we should be doing something like this for our application?
I think that they're thinking more about how they can get on our show. So I think that's more of a. I don't think that they're looking at how to rebuild the system right now. But they. So I think that I was pretty successful at meeting a lot of people that I think we're going to bring on to the second hours to talk about stuff. So, to kind of keep moving forward. I think I think that they looked at it, and I think it. For some of them, it just looks like it's way heavier than they can't quite imagine how that gets done. Like it's, especially every day. So someone went off like, I can't believe you're still doing this for every single day. Like, how does that work? Go ahead, Alex.
What I still don't understand, and because you still see this, is that people are still using Skype on major broadcasters still using Skype, and I don't get it.
It's just because it works. It works. They know how to do it. They put it together. They just don't understand how the other options are available. And we talked to quite a few folks that while they're looking at what we're doing, they still haven't used ISO. They haven't used Zoom ISO. They're still screen scraping out of HDMIs. And these are big companies, and they're still screen scraping out of it. And so of course, every time I saw that, I was dragging Andy over going, this is the person to talk to that person. So anyway, let's get this fixed. So I think it's mostly just people not knowing what's possible, like what else is there. And I think that, we're waiting to see, as the interface for Zoom ISO settles, I think we're going to spend a lot of time trying to build learning tools for folks so that they understand how easy it is to get off the ground and get moving. Go ahead, Sky.
Well, and at that level too, the engineer is going to use what they know. And why fix what ain't broke?
And it's also like,
they get paid to do a thing, and they don't get paid to be experimental or creative. It's get it done, make it happen. So to Alex's question of I don't understand, it's like, well, because it's not your job, it's their job.
and it's one of those things that like a lot of times you get to buy stuff once a year, and you have to prioritize what you're going to buy. Like in a large corporate facility, you get to make acquisition requests every quarter or every year. It goes into the budget. And then when it happens, it's like, do I upgrade something that's already, no one's complaining about it, or do I get something new and shiny that I need that will change something in the production? And so I think that's the thing you also deal with is they can't, unlike us, they can't just buy it whenever they want to. There's all this red tape that, is required that might take 6 months to a year to put in. And again, especially when it's moving quickly, when it's changing all the time, they don't even know what to get. So they just kind of look at it that way and they just go, well, and there's just always, limited number of options to kind of go forward. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I have a client who I recently did a show for, and he uses, a laptop pin farm. And we're doing a show, and the people are coming in completely out of sync because he's pulling audio off of one. And we know the potential. Big company, big budgets. They don't have the mechanism to get through all the politics to make things happen. Especially something that requires, unfortunately, with the new pricing structures of ISO, a subscription. So I just told him, I said, listen, I'll buy you the license. I'll subscribe to it for you. We'll figure out a way to charge you for it. It'll be fine. And it's going to make things so much easier.
Yeah.
And but with big companies, sometimes it's the classic story of the huge ship that's very hard to turn.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Next question.
It's from Kyle Hammond in Chicago, Illinois, asking, what was the audience response to a digital first talk at an in-person event?
Interestingly enough, I mean, there was definitely some mention of the irony of the situation, but I think that again, the hard part is, it was kind of a good example of that. Is that SVG really wants to move. They're very aggressively moving into the future, but still, you have the vendors and everything else that are used to, hey, we want to make sure there's a lot of people here, and so because that's who's paying for that, and so I think that was part of that process, but I think that. It's hard to tell. There hasn't been a demo. I mean, there hasn't been a poll yet, or I don't know how they're going to follow up with people. But I can say that as I was talking, what I saw was a lot of heads nodding. And I definitely had people come up over afterwards from some very, very large companies going, "I'm really glad you said that," or "I'm really glad you said this piece." And one of the things that got some more reaction than I expected, because I didn't have it in my talk, I was like, I talked about what I talked about, and then at the very end, I wanted to make sure that to be clear that. We have to decide, when do we do a digital first event and when do we do just digital events? And I, talked about the fact that if you're not constrained by time and space, how many times would you do this? If you weren't trying to book a space and you weren't trying to figure out how to feed everybody, how often do you do these? Because we can be doing these all the time if we don't try to have people showing up, because there's a logistics related to that. And that really struck up, kind of a nerve for a lot of people, is that, that we should be doing. The digital first events should be happening. They should be happening every year, every 6 months, every quarter, whatever that cadence is. We want digital first events so that people have the opportunity to get together. But there is an opportunity also to have these conversations in between, all of these things, where we don't have to have it 30 minutes. It can be an hour or 2 hours. And I think we're probably going to build a partnership with SVV to do things where they're a mixture of SVV and office hours, because I think that it's a different market, and I think that it's interesting for us. So I think that we overlap in about 30%, which is kind of a nice, healthy overlap between two organizations, where they're kind of dealing with tend to deal with these kind of larger solutions and so on and so forth. And we're getting people into that process. And then we have some people that are doing the larger solutions, and they have some people that are doing the kind of processes that we're doing. I think that there's a really interesting mixture between those. So you're probably going to see some partnerships over this year where we're partnering with SVV, because I think the two of us are looking at many things the same way, and they're more established in some areas than we are, and we're probably a little ahead in some areas. And so that is a really great place to partner. And so I've had a lot of good conversations with Martin Porter, who runs SVG, about that. And I think that there's a lot of interest from both sides to do that. Next question.
From Bill Davis in San Diego, and right here on our panel. At the conference, how many times did you hear the word hybrid?
Not that many. I mean, a lot of the conversations were about LED walls and 2110 and Metaverse and everything else, our digital first events. They talked about it a little bit. I will admit that my talk probably made the environment to talk about hybrid events pretty unforgiving. I kind of really talked about the fact that it was just very hard to get the result that you're trying to get with a hybrid event, and you needed to move those speakers out of that room so they could, if you really want to do a digital first event, but a hybrid event is going to put everybody in the back of the room. And I think I described it in a way that was probably clear enough that I didn't hear hybrid come up, or it came up relatively sheepishly after that. so anyway, so my mission was successful. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, that's what I was actually looking for. I was wondering whether they have moved through this or whether they were stuck thinking that's still the new thing, because in these large scale systems, they do move. I think your point about, annual budgeting is really true. And, I'm wondering how fast that part of the industry is moving through what they thought was the next stage out of the pandemic into the coming stage.
Well, I basically just compared hybrids to BlackBerries. I was like, they worked well and everyone was really connected to them. But eventually the iPhone came out and the flexibility and the scalability of the iPhone wiped the BlackBerry out. And that's what's going to happen. Next question.
Alexander Knight, Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, asking, did you receive audience pushback about digital first events with respect to the downsides of not having a physical in-person audience? If so, how did you respond?
So I didn't, because that's not what I said. So I said, what I talked about there was that a digital first event still has an audience. It still has an expo. It still has lunches. It still has all of those things. A digital first event is not, a digital event has no audience. A digital first event has everything that a physical event has, except that the speaker is no longer in the room. That's it. Like literally, that's the only change. Because I think that's the part that confuses people. Is I'm not saying that you get rid of all those things. I'm saying that you simply have a physical event. You still have the hallway conversations and the expo and everything else. You're just taking the speaker out of that area. And if you have a big enough event, it wouldn't matter anyway, because everyone will be looking at the IMAGs. So the thing is that you're changing people's experience by 2 or 3% in the room, and massively changing it for folks online. And now you have this huge, and I think that, I didn't say this in the meeting, but I really think that the physical events will get bigger because the online experience is better, because people are still going to see these as like, eventually I want to go to one of those. Like, I'm there, I'm really having a great time on the digital one. I can't get the visa right now. I can't get the flights right now, whatever, but eventually I'm going to go to one of those events. And if we keep making those digital events, these digital first events, available in more cities at one time. So my big thing is I want to do a digital first event about digital first events soon. But I want to do them bi-coastal or in a couple different continents all at the same time, so that we can show like that's the scale. Because I see these events happening. We're not going to have 30,000 people show up in one place. We're going to have 30,000 people show up in 60 locations, and they're all going to have the same experience, and they're going to have, because if you look at the tables, so you look at those little tables that I showed, let's see if I don't know if I have a wide shot of one of the, yeah. So here, if you, I'm on the wrong computer. If we, let's see if I can go back here. I just want to show, so, these are the tables. They're a 6-foot table. Everybody had the same 6-foot table. There are reps from these companies in every, most major cities and countries and so on and so forth. So there's no reason why they can't have one of those little tables at all those locations. So, and it's actually, so that they're able to spread that all out into those, and it's cheaper to have those little tables in 30 cities than it is with their local staff who's, talking to the local vendors, than it is to spend $1 million at NAB. It is. So being able to have a spread out thing and having these spread out conversations is way less expensive. And it means that your local reps are talking to your local clients, which also is useful. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, so I guess what I mean too is, because I still hear this a lot, and there are people that are very adamant about you'll never have the same experience, the dynamic, the vibe, the energy that you get of having a face-to-face conversation with someone. There's no way to really get that in this type of event. So but
we're not arguing that. We're just saying we're still gonna, the people who can make it will make it. My argument is that the people who are going to make it are going to make it. But how do we but the digital audience is going to be 10 times better and bigger if the efficiency of the online experience is half of the physical experience, but the number of people is 10x, then you're at 5x the impact. Like when you think about ROI of putting out your content. So it doesn't have to be as good. It just has, but I think over time we can make it a lot better. Some of the FMC events that they did where they had like little mixers afterwards that you could all hang out with, those were fun. Are they the same as being in the hallway? No, but not all those people can make it. So we're cutting out, we're saying, it has to be in the room. But how do I tell Mickey that, who can't get a visa in the time frame that's necessary to go to NAB? We need to make sure that Mickey and my students in Rwanda and Grant and all these other people that are all over the world, and Hosmuk and our friends in South America and Javier and getting in and out of the country or getting in and out of one of these things is not trivial if you're out of the country. And for many of us, we just don't have the budget to go in there. Going to an event is not the $100 or $500 it is to get there. It's the $500 air ticket. It's the it's the $2,000 of hotel rooms. It is all, it's a huge investment. So how do we make that more, we can be perfectionists about this, but how do we, we should all be physical, but that's not practical or possible. And so we have to look at how do we maximize the experience for that online audience, which is getting really big. Again, Tony Robbins did 1.4 million. You're going to see, I think that we could build digital first events with office hours and SVV or whatever that were 250,000 people, like around a 250,000 person event that isn't in Vegas. It's everywhere, and there's hubs, that are happening. First, it'll be 2 or 3, but my goal will be every year you see 2 or 3 more. Like we get 2 or 3 more cities and 2 or 3 more cities and a couple more continents. And before you know it, 3 years from now, there's these huge events that are happening that are expos in all of those events, and we keep the expo booths very simple and small so that you can just replicate them out, and we minimize the impact that it is required by those folks. But now you're able to expand into a much larger market because every time you do a physical event, you're excluding 99.99999% of the market, of your addressable market, not the world. We can talk of your addressable market. Can't make it to those events. But digital first, to the point that the people who are talking to you, Alex, that's why digital first has to exist and not just digital events. The digital first event allows the people who want to come to the room and be in the room, have that experience, but still generate an incredible experience for the folks that can only come digitally, and the folks that would come to a physical event in another venue, somewhere else, somewhere else in the city, but more importantly, somewhere else in the world. Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I used to go to an event called All Things Digital, which became Recode, which became Code. And I just looked up the price of going to Code, and it's $10,000. And when someone else was paying my way, that was a very good price. Now it's my way. It's the highway. So, if they came to me and said, we would do a digital first version of the Code conference, all the same guests, all the same, content in the room, but rather than being in the room, for $50, you can watch it all live. That would be an easy $50 for me.
Or 100 or 150 or 200, it could be $200 and a lot of people would show up, for Recode, for $200 for a couple of days of those discussions, if it was really a great experience, to do that. Their problem is they got to figure out, the $10,000. I mean, obviously it's a good business model. It's also to just weed a lot of people out, because, I don't know what the Davos numbers are, but they're, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars to be there. And that's to, so that a certain number of people can, be there. So it creates the exclusiveness. But to your point, I think that you could create these digital first events where the people who want to hobnob and do those dinners and everything else. And I admit The digital first, my vision, I don't know what will happen, but my vision for a digital first event is that it's really expensive to come. And there's 100 seats, maybe 200 seats max, but it's like 100 seats and it's like $1,500 a person to go. But when you're there, there's great dinners, there's entertainment. We're going to have a show by a band. And, like there's a thing that is really exclusive for the 100 people that could pay for it. And for the digital first folks, though, they are front row for all the discussions. And we build special things for them that may not be the same as the ones that we can do when you're in person, but they're still great events. There's exclusive ways. Like I want to go, if we have 20 booths, we're going to take a camera to every booth, the way we do with NAB or with NAMM. We'll take a camera, but that camera represents 2,000 people. Like, they're going to walk up and ask questions of your booth for an hour or two, and 2,000 people are standing at your booth right now. And for a vendor, that's way better, than just this kind of hodgepodge of stuff that happens right now. Next question.
Alexander is back with a question. Is there more buzz about Zoom ISO in the industry? Did anyone talk about that, even casually, about what could be accomplished with it?
Well, we had Andy up for 15 minutes, so we did talk about it. So Andy and I had a quick discussion. I'm sure that was recorded and will go up eventually. But so Andy and I just talked about the history of, how Liminal got started and how it became part of Zoom and what they're doing with it and how they produce it. So I think it definitely had some folks. I mean, afterwards, it definitely had people coming up to at least me. I'm sure Andy too, but asking about it, like, oh, we've been doing these like just screen scrapes and not really. Or people coming up and saying, yeah, we're using, ISO. And so those are, and there's some really there's some interestingly complicated questions about how to manage call-ins and callers and everything else. So I think we're going to see some really interesting developments as we move forward. Last question.
Last question from Alexander Knight in Canada. Do we know anything about the final delivered recording for the event? Will it be able to watch it in 4K with HDR?
I doubt it. But we'll see. I have no idea how it was recorded. I didn't manage that part, so I don't know if it was recorded. But they had a 6K there. If it was me, I would have recorded it at 6K, and then converted it all down and did color correction and everything else. They're just discussions around it. I'm not sure if it would be worth it with two cameras in the back to do it in 4K, but it could be. Just to show that you could, I think it would be there. So I think that overall, we're really excited about what SVV is doing, and I think that there's going to be a great way for us to integrate, what we're doing. I think that there's a lot of, I kind of see them as almost a sister organization that, we can, I think that there's things that we're doing that are really interesting to them, and there's things that they're doing that's really interesting to us. And so I think that we're going to find ways to work with them to do this. So this was just the beginning of that process. And so we'll cover it. And this is the lightest version of our coverage of an event. So Alex takes a couple photos. What we want to do, hopefully, is in this kind of event in the future, hopefully more of us show up at one of these events and take more pictures and video and everything else. I realized the one thing I learned was that it was hard because I was in so many conversations and there were so many people that wanted to talk that I didn't have as much energy. I didn't have as much energy focused on it as capturing as much as I probably would have otherwise. And so I think if I just went in to cover it, it was fine. But I think that that was the challenge. But I think we got some. I think we found the most interesting pieces of that puzzle there. All right. Thanks to the producers for all the great questions. I wasn't sure if it was going to go for a whole hour, but the questions just kept rolling in and moving through it. So thanks for all the great questions and your attention. And thanks to the panelists, of course. Can't do this without you. It was great to be back. I missed yesterday. I was going to try to do yesterday from a hotel room, and I was just like, I don't know how much bandwidth. Turns out I would have had enough bandwidth at the Sashi in Mountain View. 20 down, 40 up, just in case you're wondering. So anyway, brand new hotel. So that's the one. But I could have done it, but I just did because I didn't know what the hotel was going to be like. I was like, I'd just rather have Bill run that. Did that go yesterday? Go well yesterday? Did you guys?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell from the inside, but yeah, it felt good. Yeah. Interesting guest. He had a lot of good things to say.
It's great. And of course, thanks to the incredible back-end team who I talked about a lot yesterday with a lot of people of, just how amazing what we do is, and people coming in from all over the world to produce an event every day, 7 days a week. It's just crazy. So anyway, I really thank everybody's effort and what we're putting together. So thanks so much. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours. 62,000 miles, 100,000 kilometers, 563 bananas
per scale. About 563 million bananas per scale.
There's a Hasmuk sighting.
There's a Hasmuk sighting. We see Hasmuk. We're gonna do the overflow. We need to do an overflow room in Cape Town. So we do the digital first event. I'm gonna need a room in there. We're gonna see we're also in Cape Town, and then everyone will wave. So that's gonna be important. All right.
Just added a lot of bananas for Hasmuk.
Oh, I gotta go.
Bye.
Bye-bye.